Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am so glad that you're here and that you've hopefully been enjoying these videos for this past year. And we have some fun things coming up for this month of December. We are asking for you guys for your input. Of course, we want you guys to, of course, click the like button and the share button and the subscribe button if you're not subscribed to these videos, so you're getting all the most current content for these videos that we're sharing with you guys. And so today I'm joined with the amazing Travis Jones, and we're going to be talking today about government aid and what that means in our community. How can Love Inc. Help with assistance and help with other areas in our community? But for right now, we're going to move right over to Travis and your topic of your conversation for today. So welcome, Travis. Glad you're here.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Good. So why do we so often as Christians, why do we so often critique social services for enabling people?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I want to point out first is that this is kind of a trend we see in Christianity in America. In our context here, we're in the Northwest, and we can find this common critique from Christians and even outside of the church as well, that our government services, social services are enabling people. And I get that there is a valid concern there. And I think there are instances where people are enabled by it, and we can make sense of it kind of logically in our head too, when those services are constantly provided for you. And then it's harder for you to actually go out and get a job and work and provide for yourself. Then those services might enable you to continue living off of those services. So I recognize the validity in that, but I think all too often our understanding of that is shaped by media that doesn't necessarily always portray the truth of the reality of a majority of people receiving government aid. The truth is, a majority of the people receiving government aid are working families. I dropped some different things I quoted from in my blog post for this week that talk about specifically looking in 2024, about a third of people in Oregon receiving SNAP benefits were above the poverty line in yearly income, which to me that indicates that these are people who are working and bringing in money and still are having trouble making ends meet, still need that extra support in providing the basics like food and other things. And so we have to recognize, we might have these ideas that government aid does this or that or allows this and that. And that may be true in some instances. There may be some cases. I know Lois Tupy and her redemptive compassion training that we offer here through Love Inc., she offers this critique quite a bit. And it seems that this is stemming from her own experience in working with people who are living with government aid, government services. And so there is the reality that does happen from time to time, but we can't think that that's always the case, that's always the standard, that everybody who gets government aid is being enabled, is dependent on it, because that's just not true.
Yeah, I think it is. Sorry for editing. I told you about this.
Don't worry, I'll edit that out.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I think that the challenge can be is that we use a broad brush when it comes to government assistance.
Yeah,
and we
lots of things. Yeah,
and the problem with using a broad brush is we often don't recognize that there are individual bristles.
Right.
And in this analogy would be people that are affected. And I think that we can maybe, as a church and as a people of Christ or Christians, we can easily use that broad brush. Right. And paint even in that sense of the negative for it. Do you find that there's many voices within the church that are against government assistance?
In many of the Christian spaces I've been in, there does seem to be resistance, a little kind of chafing towards government aid, government services. And that's been my personal experience. It's obviously not necessarily the norm everywhere in every church in America, and certainly not the whole world. But what I've seen presented a lot, portrayed a lot in the media and in the Christian subculture that I've kind of been in most of my life, there has been a lot of concern, a lot of resistance towards too much government aid. We are concerned, and again, that's kind of going back to that enabling idea that we're too concerned that the government is taking money out of our paychecks to enable those people who are entitled and living off of government aid and things like that. Just these myths, these caricatures that just are not true and factual. And the danger, I think, that we see in all of this is that we are coming to these conclusions without ever actually knowing the people who we are making conclusions about. We can think that we can come to these conclusions that, government is doing this and that, but without ever really knowing the people who are receiving SNAP benefits, who are receiving other, Social Security, disability, other services like that. And it's also really easy for us to judge something that's kind of abstract, kind of out there. But when it comes home to us, when it affects our lives, and I mentioned that in the article at the beginning of my blog post, that, it's easy to kind of critique those things out there, but when now you lose your job and get unemployment like I did for a period of time, now all of a sudden it kind of changes how you think about it, and you realize like, wow, okay, I thought that this was bad for our society or whatever. And then I realized how much it helped me, and now I can recognize like, no, this is beneficial. This is good for our society.
Yeah, I think that even what I'm hearing from you, and if we read our scriptures, read our Bibles, the church is supposed to be the ones caring for the poor, the widow, the orphan, the alien.
Absolutely.
And so I don't want to get into a whole lot of, maybe this will start a comment section.
Hey.
But I do feel like this is the responsibility of the church.
Right.
And we have really allowed the government to kind of be a supplement for what the church is supposed to be doing now, biblically, and what we've been commanded to do.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the church has kind of failed in this area of allowing the government to assist?
In some ways, I would say the church has kind of fallen short of God's calling on us to love our neighbors well. And what I recognize in my just brief kind of learning about and understanding of Christian history, and especially in America and American history in the last century or so, is that the government has started providing more social services to care for people in need, especially since, I believe it was the New Deal and kind of during the Great Depression and all, that those services started to step in and fill those gaps that were there to help people who were struggling to put food on the table, to pay rent, or just different things like that. And those services really started helping. And what it seems to me, right, this is my opinion, but just looking at the history, that as the church, a majority, not necessarily all, but a majority of the church in America kind of started to say, well, if the government is caring for those physical needs, like food, like a place to live, things like that, then we'll just focus on the spiritual needs, and we won't bother trying to help people who are hungry or things like that. And I think the danger in that is that splits the gospel into two parts that it wasn't supposed to be split into. The gospel cares about our physical bodies, about whether or not we're hungry or have a roof over our head. And the gospel also cares that we know Christ and have a relationship with him and are connected in the church body. And we need to, as the church, we need to recognize that, yes, the government is providing a lot of these services. And in a lot of ways, there's a lot of money going into this that definitely not one church probably could provide to meet all of those needs. So we need to learn to come alongside and to complement what the government is doing to care for people, but recognize that it's incomplete. Even in the services that are provided by the government, Matthew Desmond, and I quoted him in the blog as well, he writes that really the main problem for a lot of people who are in poverty is that they don't know about or aren't able to access the benefits, the social supports that are there for them. And so we as the church need to come alongside and recognize, how can we complement the work that the government's doing? There's a lot of money being devoted to helping people, and how can we as the church come alongside and provide additional resources and support, but also provide those relationships, provide that personal support, because the government's paints with a very broad brush, because it has to. There's 330 million people in this country. We can't give personalized support. And so we as the church, we're there to provide that support. We're there to provide those relationships that are actually going to help people thrive.
Yeah, that's so good. There's a ton of scripture that are going through my mind, a ton of questions I have for you related to this subject. Obviously, we won't be able to get to that today. So if you guys could just make some comments in the comment section. Maybe you have a question. Leave a scripture that you think elevates this conversation as well. We'd like to read it ourselves and follow up with you guys on this. But for now, make sure that, again, you are liking these videos, you're subscribing to them, and you're sharing these with your friends and maybe some family members. It'll really help this channel get more visibility and an opportunity to be able to serve more people on these subjects. So, Travis, thanks again for your input today and your wisdom on this subject. Obviously, go and check out his blog, and so that we can continue to serve and minister in this way to this community. Thank you guys so much. God bless. Take care.